Imagine stepping into a world where the air is thick with smoke, laughter, and the unmistakable aroma of burnt bread and ale. A place where knights, farmers, and wandering bards all rub shoulders, sharing stories, gossip, and occasionally a sharp elbow when the night gets rowdy. Welcome to the medieval tavern, the heartbeat of every town, the unofficial news center, and the ultimate stage for chaos, camaraderie, and curiosity. Tonight, we're about to step through its heavy wooden doors and experience a slice of history like never before. But before we dive in, if you enjoy wandering through the untold, messy, and often hilarious corners of history, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it helps us keep exploring the past together. While you're at it, leave a comment below telling us where you're rewatching from and what time it is for you at. It's always fascinating to see our community span the globe, all gathered in one shared moment of curiosity. Now, let your imagination wander. Picture the streets outside, muddy, slick with rain, and carrying the pungent medley of hoarse smoke and questionable cooking. You push open the tavern door, and instantly, the world outside disappears. Darkness, warmth, and a chorus of voices envelop you. The floor is uneven, the benches lopsided, and the tables seem to have been scattered in a hurry by someone with no sense of design. A one-eyed dog guards a stray bone, a man argues about a stolen chicken, and a bard strums a half-tuned lute in the corner, missing a few teeth, but not a note of confidence. Here, everyone has a story. Some are wild, some are tragic, and some are downright absurd. You'll see people negotiating deals over mugs of ale, exchanging tall tales, flirting in ways that would make modern romance look tame, and occasionally launching into a bar fight that's more comedic than deadly. And yet, amidst the chaos, there's a rhythm, a heartbeat that keeps the tavern alive. It's messy, it's loud, it's sometimes smelly, but it's authentic. This was where communities formed, news spread, and even strangers could find a moment of belonging. And it's not just about the people. The food, the drink, the music, and the stories, they all paint a vivid picture of life in an era we often only read about in dusty books. Ale, strong enough to knock your boots off, bread that doubles as a weapon, and cheese that tells its own pungent story. Smells, sounds, and textures of the tavern create an experience that's equal parts exhilarating and exhausting. And it's a reminder that history wasn't just dates and battles, it was lived, breathed, and occasionally slept on the floor next to a snoring stranger. So, dim the lights, maybe grab a blanket, and settle in. Tonight, we're not just learning about history, we're walking through it, tasting it, hearing it, and feeling the pulse of a world that is simultaneously chaotic and captivating. This is boring history for sleep, but I promise, once you step inside the medieval tavern, boring is the last thing you'll feel. As you push further into the dimly lit interior of the medieval tavern, the world outside seems to dissolve entirely, leaving you suspended in a bubble of chaotic life that pulses with energy and unpredictability. These taverns were far more than mere drinking establishments. They were the very social arteries of the town, where information, rumor, and laughter flowed as freely as the ale, and where every visitor, whether a battle-worn knight, a sun-browned farmer, or a wandering bard with a lute slung over his shoulder, found a space that was simultaneously welcoming and perilously unpredictable. The walls, blackened from countless fires, seemed to absorb the stories and secrets of generations, each scar, chip, and soot-stained timber serving as a silent witness to the dramas, jokes, quarrels, and reconciliations that unfolded night after night. The floor, uneven and sticky with remnants of spilled drinks, was crowded with mismatched benches and tables, where weary travelers nursed mugs of ale, while merchants whispered deals over half-eaten loaves of bread, and musicians plucked out notes from worn strings, some tuning carefully, others striking chords with wild abandon. The cacophony somehow melding into a rhythm that made the chaos feel almost intentional. Everywhere you look, life is in motion. A knight, helmet tucked under his arm, debates loudly with a farmer over the price of grain, their voices rising and falling in tandem with the crash of tankards and the occasional startled yelp of a child darting through the legs of patrons to swipe a fallen coin or a crust of bread. A one-eyed dog pads cautiously between tables, sniffing for scraps while keeping a wary eye on the rowdy brawl erupting near the hearth, where a drunken bard attempts a heroic leap over a chair and lands squarely in someone's stew, drawing laughter that echoes through the rafters. The air is thick with the mingling scents of roasted meats, spilled ale, smoke from the hearth, and the unmistakable tang of unwashed bodies, creating an aroma that is both intoxicating and a little alarming, and yet, in a strange way, deeply comforting, as though every smell carries the collective memory of countless nights spent within these walls. Conversations overlap in a beautiful disorder, from flirtatious remarks aimed at a bold-eyed barmaid, moving with a confidence that commands respect, to whispered secrets shared by conspiratorial figures plotting faraway schemes, all punctuated by the clatter of utensils, the occasional cheer for a successful dice roll, and the hearty, booming laughter of those who have surrendered entirely to the evening's indulgences. The tavern was not merely a stage for social interaction, but a living organism that reflected the society surrounding it, where hierarchies blurred under the flickering candlelight, and where the sharp edges of daily life, poverty, illness, the constant threat of violence were both celebrated and momentarily softened by the warmth of communal gathering. Here, a farmer could share a bench with a nobleman, exchanging tales of harvests and hardships without pretense. A traveling bard could command the attention of everyone in the room with a clever ballad or a well-timed jest, earning both coin and admiration. And the tavern keeper, a figure often as formidable as any knight, moved through this human tapestry with a practiced eye, ensuring that mischief did not tip over into true danger while dispensing drinks that ranged from surprisingly exquisite to predictably terrible. Each sip a gamble, each bowl of stew a tiny adventure in flavor and patience. In this chaotic, vibrant, and often hazardous environment, the medieval tavern was more than just a place to drink. It was a microcosm of life itself, a world where stories were born, reputations forged or shattered, and every visit promised a new chapter in the endlessly unfolding human drama. Stepping deeper into the heart of the tavern, the atmosphere presses in around you like a living, breathing entity, a dense tapestry woven from smoke, noise, and the indefinable chaos of countless lives intersecting in a single, dimly lit space where the air hangs heavy with the acrid temps of burnt wood, mingling with the sour sweetness of spilled ale, the sharp bite of unwashed bodies, and the faint, almost imperceptible aroma of yesterday's stew left to sit too long on the hearth, creating a sensory experience so overwhelming that it both exhilarates and unsettles, leaving you aware of every movement, every whisper, every eruption of laughter or shouts of anger echoing off the blackened beams above. The noise is a constant, surging tide that ebbs and flows unpredictably from the gruff voices of men debating fiercely over debts or livestock, to the high, sharp laughter of women moving through the crowd with confident purpose, their skirts brushing against tables and knees of seated patrons, while the occasional child darts through this living maze, clutching a scrap of bread or a coin, chased half-heartedly by a weary parent or ignored entirely by adults too engrossed in their own stories to intervene. All layered over the erratic plucking of a bard attempting a tune on a half-tuned lute whose strings squeak and snap in protest, creating a soundtrack that is simultaneously jarring and mesmerizing. The chaotic energy of the tavern extends beyond mere sound. It is present in every glance, every gesture, in every object strewn across the uneven floor. were the remains of last night's revelry: a broken mug, a tangle of straw, a dropped knife, a coat smeared with mud and ale tale, a silent story of unrestrained living in the perpetual dance between order and disorder. And yet, within this apparent lawlessness, there exists a strange rhythm, a pulse that binds the chaos together, a logic that only those accustomed to its rhythms could decipher. As arguments flare up over nothing and everything in equal measure, then dissolve into laughter, clapping, or the slapping of a hand on a table to assert dominance or camaraderie, while the pervasive smoke, curling from the hearth and scattered braziers, wraps the room in a haze that softens the sharp edges of the world, lending everything a dreamlike quality, as though you are glimpsing a world simultaneously real and imagined. A place where the boundaries between fear, exhilaration, and comfort blur into a single, intoxicating sensation that leaves every sense heightened and every moment unpredictable. Sanitation, or the lack thereof, only adds to this strange charm and terror. Floors are sticky, tables bear evidence of countless spills, and the smell of unwashed bodies mixes freely with that of food and animals wandering in and out at will. Yet, instead of repelling the patrons, it reinforces the tavern's identity as a sanctuary of honesty, a place where pretension is useless, and survival, humor, and community are the currencies that matter most. Where the roughest, most exhausted traveler can find warmth, company, and perhaps even a story to carry home, other regulars navigate the mess with practiced ease, recognizing faces, habits, and the subtle signs that signal trouble before it erupts. In all of this together, the smoke, the noise, the heat, the muddle of humanity creates an atmosphere so alive, so raw, and so utterly compelling that it transcends mere discomfort, drawing you into a world where every sound, smell, and movement tells a story, and where chaos itself becomes a form of welcome, a celebration of life in all its messy, noisy, unsanitized glory. As your eyes adjust to the smoky haze and the chaotic symphony of sounds, the interior of the tavern begins to reveal itself in all its haphazard glory, space that seems to have been assembled not by careful design, but by the whims of countless hands over decades, each contributing a table, a bench, a barrel, or a crate in an improvisational dance that somehow achieves a form of functional anarchy, where no two pieces of furniture align, and yet every spot has its purpose if you know how to read the room. As though the tavern itself possesses an unspoken logic that only regulars can decipher. A sturdy wooden bench, scarred and worn from countless bottoms, sits adjacent to a low table whose legs are uneven, forcing mugs and plates to teeter perilously, while a stack of barrels in the corner serves as both impromptu seating and a storage solution for extra ale, their surfaces sticky from spills, long dried and forgotten, and crates, some of which were once meant to transport goods, but have been repurposed as tables or chairs, jostled for space alongside benches carved from rough-hewn timber, all arranged in a sprawling, uneven mosaic that mirrors the chaotic energy of the patrons themselves, to move through the space with practiced agility, dodging chairs, elbows, spilled stew, as if navigating a living, breathing maze. The placement of every object seems arbitrary at first glance, but a closer look reveals a subtle wisdom born of necessity. The widest gaps in the furniture allow room for a dancing bard or a man wielding a mug too vigorously, while narrower passages force travelers to brush shoulders and exchange murmured greetings or sly jokes, the arrangement acting as a silent mediator for interaction, conflict, and camaraderie all at once, as if the tavern had evolved organically to meet the unpredictable needs of the community it serves, accommodating bar fights, musical performances, feasts, and even a sleeping traveler crammed under a table without ever being planned or mapped in any conventional sense. The uneven surfaces and mismatched chairs contribute to the tavern's unique character, with each dent, scratch, and burn mark narrating a fragment of its history: a mug thrown in anger, chair overturned in celebration, crate scarred by the passage of a dozen pairs of boots, each imperfection adding depth and texture to the chaotic canvas, making the space feel lived in, authentic, and impossibly alive. Even the lighting, provided by a handful of flickering candles in the central hearth, interacts with the disorderly furniture to cast long, dancing shadows across the walls, highlighting the irregularity of every plank, barrel, and crate, and amplifying the sense of intimacy and unpredictability that makes the tavern both alluring and intimidating. A place where every nook might conceal a secret conversation, a hidden stash of coins, or a dog curled up contentedly among the chaos. And yet, despite so perhaps because of its disorder, the tavern feels whole, a living ecosystem in which the furniture, the patrons, and the stories they tell exist in a dynamic balance, constantly shifting, clattering, and colliding, creating a space that is as much a character in the story as the people who inhabit it, and where even the most casual observer cannot help but feel both overwhelmed and irresistibly drawn into its messy, vibrant heart. Amidst the chaotic sprawl of benches, tables, barrels, and crates, the true soul of the tavern reveals itself in its patrons, a living mosaic of humanity and life that spills over the edges of convention and expectation, where the rough-hewn men with sun-scorched faces and calloused hands sit shoulder to shoulder with sharp-witted women's eyes glint with intelligence and mischief, commanding respect with a single glance or a perfectly timed retort, while children dart between legs and under tables, swiping a scrap of bread here, a dropped coin there, moving with a fearless audacity born of familiarity with the unpredictable energy that fills the room. And animals, dogs mostly, some limping, some sleek and cunning, others one-eyed or mangy, all of them confident in their placebed between the human feet, occasionally snagging a morsel of food or curling up by a fire. Their presence both comforting and chaotic, reminding everyone of the blend of survival and companionship that defines the space. The men in the tavern are a spectacle unto themselves, a collection of figures sculpted by hard labor and harder lives, their voices deep and gravelly, carrying stories of battlefields, farms, and long journeys. Their laughter often rough, bellowing, and contagious, punctuated by sudden bursts of argument over debts, wagers, or perceived slights. Yet, beneath the gruff exterior lies a code of loyalty and unspoken respect, an understanding that while the night may be wild, there is safety in numbers and in shared indulgence, and that a stranger, once proven trustworthy, at least amusing, can become part of this temporary, smoke-filled society. The women are equally formidable, roofing through the throng with the ease of someone rout who has navigated the turbulence of life and learned to wield both words and glances as tools of influence, their voices sharp and melodic, cutting through the din to negotiate, admonish, tease, or charm, and their presence often serves as a stabilizing force in a room where tempers flare and mugs fly, where one sharp look can silence a brawl or redirect the energy of the crowd with near magical precision. Children add a layer of unpredictability and vitality, their tiny feet tapping and scurrying as they weave through the chaos, learning from every gesture, every whispered secret, every display of courage or folly, growing up within the rhythm of the tavern and absorbing the lessons of human interaction in a space where life is lived in all its raw immediacy, teaching them resilience, cleverness, and the understanding that sometimes survival is about knowing when to duck, when to speak, and when to grin at the absurdity of the world around them. Meanwhile, the animals, ever present, yet entirely self-contained in their behaviors, remind everyone that life continues beyond human concerns, sniffing out morsels, curling around tired travelers, barking at those who misstep, and adding a layer of warmth, companionship, and unpredictability that mirrors the tavern's very essence, a living, breathing organism in which chaos, order, humor, and survival intermingle in a timeless dance that is equal parts exhausting, exhilarating, and unforgettable. In this room, humanity and nature coexist in a symphony of disorder. Every glance, movement, and sound, a note contributing to a melody that is at once raw, beautiful, and unreplicably alive, drawing every visitor into its pulse and reminding them that the tavern is not merely a location, but a microcosm of life itself, with all its contradictions, complexities, and unexpected joys. As the evening deepens and the tavern's smoky haze settles around the clustered bodies of its patrons, your attention inevitably drifts to the sustenance that fuels this chaotic world. For here, food and drink are not mere necessities, but integral characters in the nightly drama. Each morsel and sip carrying its own story, risk, and reward. And every meal served within these walls is as unpredictable as the people who consume it, reflecting both the ingenuity and the improvisation required to survive in a world without standardized recipes, sanitation codes, or modern convenience. It's the ale, poured from barrels that have seen decades of use, and occasionally a skirmish or two, strong enough to warm the heart, loosen the tongue, and sometimes cloud judgment entirely, ranging from surprisingly smooth and rich with malt and honey, to bitter, sour, and bracingly potent gamble for the uninitiated that may leave one either exhilarated or grimacing. While cider, made from apples either freshly plucked or long forgotten in a heap at the edge of the orchard, carries a tangy, sometimes unpredictable sharpness that makes each swallow an adventure in taste, and a reminder that the tavern is a place where risk and pleasure are inseparable companions. Bread, the humble staple, arrives in shapes and textures that defy expectation. Some loaves are dense, heavy, and dark, offering a chew that is almost weapon-like in its resilience, capable of knocking a chair askew if swung with intent, while others, baked the same day and still warm, provide a fleeting softness that seems almost luxurious in contrast. Though none are presented with a fork or knife, patrons are expected to bring their own cutlery or, in the absence of such, to improvise with fingers, spoons, or even the edge of a wooden table if hunger demands, a practical adaptation that speaks volumes about the resourcefulness of those who have frequented these establishments. Cheese, pungent and unashamedly aromatic, arrives in wedges that may have developed a tangy crust reminiscent of the earth itself, sometimes veering toward the acrid, yet this intensity is embraced rather than avoided, a testament to the palate and patience of medieval diners who understood that flavor and endurance often traveled hand in hand, and that food was as much about sustenance as it was about experience, community, and the stories told while consuming it. Canes, of course, are non-existent, leaving sleeves, shared rags, or mere patience as the only defense against spills, crumbs, and strayed drips of ale or stew, a constant reminder that refinement takes a back seat to practicality, and that the tavern is a place where the raw realities of life, mess, clumsiness, and the unavoidable intimacy of shared space is not just tolerated, but woven into the very fabric of daily existence, where every meal, every mug, and every morsel becomes part of the narrative of the night, contributing to a sensory experience so vivid, so unfiltered, and so inextricably tied to the people, animals, and furniture around you that it is impossible to separate the sustenance from the atmosphere itself. As the taste, texture, aroma, and sheer unpredictability of what you consume mirror the lively, disorderly, and unforgettable essence of the medieval tavern, turning even the simplest act of eating and drinking into a story worth savoring, laughed over, remembered, and retold long after the last mug has been drained and the embers of the hearth fade into darkness. As the mugs clink and the hearth's fire casts flickering shadows across the uneven walls, the tavern transforms yet again, shifting from a place of sustenance to a theater of human expression, where entertainment reigns in forms as diverse and unpredictable as the crowd itself, and the very air seems charged with anticipation. For here, amid the smoke and muddled scents of ale and cheese, bards claim their corners with an audacious confidence, their half-tuned lutes squeaking and straining as they launch into ballads that weaved tales of heroism, tragedy, and bawdy humor, each note and lyric delivered with dramatic flair, exaggerated gestures, and a wink or a nod to ensure that even the most distracted patron cannot escape the performance, while stories, some true, some embellished, some entirely invented in the moment flow, like the ale, capturing attention, eliciting laughter, provoking gasps, and sometimes even inspiring a spontaneous toast or an eruption of applause that rattles the mugs and barrels in a symphony of celebratory chaos. Flirting in the tavern is its own art form, a subtle yet raucous dance that mixes words, gestures, and bravado with a daring sense of humor. As men lean across benches with uneven teeth flashing in dim light, offering compliments that wobble between charm and absurdity, while women respond with sharp wit, playful slaps of bread crusts, or teasing retorts that draw laughter from their companions and onlookers alike, creating a living performance that is as much about social navigation and daring as it is about romance. A ritualized spectacle in which every glance, every smile, and every clumsy attempt at gallantry becomes a story to be remembered and retold long after the night has ended. Bar fights, far from being grim or deadly, punctuate the evening with a theatrical, almost slapstick energy, erupting without warning when tempers flare or misunderstandings ignite. Yet, more often than not, these skirmishes are comical in their execution, as fists miss intended targets, chairs topple, mugs spill, and participants tumble into tables, benches, or even the central hearth, their shouts mingling with laughter and the occasional roar of approval from the tavern keeper, who might wield a ladle or wooden club with a mix of authority and theatrical flourish to restore order, not with lethal intent, but with a performative command that asserts control while adding to the spectacle, turning potential chaos into a shared, unforgettable experience. Children, watching wide-eyed from the periphery, learn early the rhythms of this world, when to cheer, when to duck, when to laugh, and when to flee, absorbing lessons in courage, cunning, and social awareness alongside the music and stories, while animals, unbothered by the human drama, weave through legs, curl near the fire, or bark at overzealous participants, their presence lending a further layer of unpredictability and life to the scene. The tavern, in these hours of storytelling, music, flirting, and comic chaos, becomes more than a location. It is a living stage, a crucible in which every sound, gesture, and interaction contributes to a tapestry of entertainment that mirrors the unpredictability, humor, and warmth of life itself, offering each patron not merely diversion, but a chance to witness and participate in a celebration of humanity in all its messy, raucous, and unforgettable glory. As the night stretches on and the ale flows more freely, the heat of the hearth mingling with the lingering smoke and laughter, the revelry slowly begins to ebb for some, yet, for others, the tavern offers no respite but the promise of a precarious, makeshift slumber amidst the chaotic sprawl of benches, tables, and bodies. 4 private rooms were a luxury reserved for those with wealth or influence, and most patrons had to adapt to the unpredictable generosity of the space itself, carving out a patch of floor, a corner behind a table, or a bench that might be damp, sticky, or suspiciously tilted, transforming these humble surfaces into temporary beds where exhaustion could finally overpower the demands of drink, noise, and conversation. Travelers, weary from long days on muddy roads and aching muscles, would curl into themselves beneath the uneven planks of tables, using a cloak, a bundle of straw, or the nearest dog as a makeshift pillow, accepting the warmth and familiarity of companions and animals alike, while surrendering to sleep in a state of chaotic intimacy that blurred the lines between comfort and discomfort, security and exposure, with every snore, shuffle, and clatter becoming part of the lullaby of the tavern. A symphony of human and animal life that lulled some into deep rest and left others in a light, vigilant half-sleep, ready to react to the slightest provocation. Benches, long and narrow, bore the weight of multiple sleepers at once, their wooden surfaces hard against bodies, yet strangely accommodating as patrons learned to shift, squeeze, and contort themselves in ways that maximized both space and warmth. Sharing body heat, stories, and sometimes accidental contact with neighbors whose identities would be forgotten by morning, but whose presence contributed to a sense of shared endurance, a silent camaraderie forged through necessity and the ever-present unpredictability of the tavern's corners, often overlooked during the day as prime seating or storage, became sanctuaries in the night, small pockets of relative darkness where one could curl against walls, furniture, or sacks of grain or herbs, carving out a private refuge amidst the larger chaos while remaining tethered to the heartbeat of the room. Aware of the movements, whispers, and occasional eruptions of laughter or argument that punctuated the otherwise still hours. Under tables, the most daring and resourceful of sleepers would stake their claim, drawing a blanket, cloak, or spare tunic around themselves to shield from drafts and wandering feet, sometimes alongside animals who had claimed the same hidden alcove, creating a bond of mutual survival and quiet comfort amidst the ever-present possibility of disruption. Whether from a clumsy drunk knocking over a chair, a bold child racing past in search of stolen morsels, or the tavern keeper stepping cautiously to ensure that all remained in relative order, their presence a reminder that safety, however temporary and imperfect, existed even within this hive of unpredictability. In these arrangements, the tavern revealed yet another layer of its identity, not merely a place of entertainment, sustenance, and social interaction, but a sanctuary for those seeking rest in a world where comfort was rare. Privacy was fleeting, and the intimacy of shared space, however chaotic or uncomfortable, became a testament to human resilience, adaptability, and the enduring ability to find warmth, camaraderie, and fleeting peace even in the most unruly of environments. Yet beyond the clatter of mugs, the pungent aromas of ale and cheese, the haphazard benches and barrels, and even the makeshift sleeping arrangements that forced travelers, laborers, and wanderers into close proximity with one another, the medieval tavern offered something far more profound and enduring than mere sustenance or shelter. For within these smoky, chaotic walls, amid the laughter, argument, music, and occasional scuffle, there existed a sense of belonging that transcended wealth, status, or origin. Tage, a communal heartbeat that drew together knights fresh from campaigns, farmers weary from the fields, bards with strings half broken and voices unpolished, women sharp of wit and stronger of will, children learning the rhythms of life through observation, and even the animals who roamed freely, sharing in the warmth and security of the space, creating a tapestry of human and animal life interwoven with stories, memories, and shared experience. It's a living archive of the town's collective existence, a place where one's presence mattered simply because one was there, and where every gesture, glance, and uttered word became part of the ongoing narrative of the tavern itself. Stories, both told and enacted, were the lifeblood of this community, flowing as freely as the ale, and often blurring the line between entertainment, instruction, and moral lesson. For every patron contributed a verse, an anecdote, a tall tale, or a whispered confession, and in doing so, strengthened bonds of trust and recognition, weaving a social fabric that was at once fragile and resilient, personal and communal, ephemeral and eternal, a network of human connection that allowed travelers to feel anchored, workers to feel celebrated, and outcasts to find, if only for the night, a place where they mattered and where the weight of the outside world, its uncertainties, dangers, and inequities, could be momentarily set aside in favor of laughter. shared meals, music, and the unspoken assurance that one was part of something larger than oneself. The tavern's sense of community was not constructed through decorum or formal rules, but through the messy, vibrant, and often unpredictable interactions that took place within its walls. As patrons learned to negotiate conflicts, celebrate victories, console one another in minor misfortunes, can engage in the delicate dance of social bonds that required humor, tolerance, cunning, and empathy in equal measure. And in this way, the tavern became a crucible of human experience, a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary collided, where life's challenges could be rehearsed in microcosm, and where each person's story, whether of triumph, folly, love, or loss, came interlaced with the stories of others, creating a shared memory that would linger in the smoke-stained beams, the worn benches, the sticky floors, and the hearts of all who had passed through, ensuring that, long after the ale was drained, the bread eaten, the fire dimmed, and the last footstep faded into the night, the tavern remained a vessel of belonging, a sanctuary of narrative, and a testament to the enduring human need for connection, laughter, and recognition, a reminder that even in the messiest, rowdiest, and most chaotic of spaces, one could find not just survival, but community, identity, and a place where the stories of many converged to form something far greater than the sum of their parts. As the echo of clinking mugs, raucous laughter, and the murmur of stories fades into the imagination of our journey, we shift now from the smoky, chaotic taverns of medieval towns to the sun-drenched sands and monumental architecture of ancient Egypt, where history speaks not only through stone and hieroglyph, but through the extraordinary life of a woman whose presence would ripple across centuries. Queen Nefertiti's rise to prominence alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten marked a revolution in the spiritual and cultural fabric of one of the world's most enduring civilizations, and whose story continues to captivate scholars, artists, and dreamers alike. Nefertiti did not simply occupy a throne by virtue of birth or marriage. She emerged as a central figure beside a pharaoh who dared to defy tradition, reshaping religious worship by promoting the monotheistic adoration of the sun Tiscaten, and in doing so, challenging centuries of deeply ingrained ritual, priestly authority, and artistic convention. Her influence apparent not just in the political sphere, but in the very ethos of everyday life. From temples and tombs to hymns and ceremonial art, where her likeness appears, in poses of regal authority that rival those of kings, asserting a presence that is at once commanding, serene, and profoundly human, walking through the streets of Akhenaten. The city, Akhenaten, founded as the center of this spiritual revolution. One can almost imagine Nefertiti moving with purpose among courtiers, advisors, and artisans, her eyes observing, calculating, and inspiring, her voice guiding ceremonies and decrees, her image carved and painted on walls alongside that of the pharaoh, not as a mere adornment, but as a symbol of partnership, power, and divine sanction, a living testament to the possibility of female authority in a world largely dominated by men and tradition. And in this context, the stories of her intellect, diplomacy, and presence become more than historical curiosity. They become a lens through which to view a civilization in flux, grappling with questions of faith, leadership, and the boundaries of gender and influence, all encapsulated in the figure of a queen whose very name, Nefertiti, meaning the beautiful one has come, evokes both admiration and mystery. Her prominence was felt in every corner of Egyptian life, from the revolutionary art that depicted elongated forms and intimate family scenes, to the hymns and prayers sung in reverence to Aten, and to the subtle yet unmistakable ways she wielded her influence over courtly affairs, diplomacy, and religious observance, a presence that reshaped expectations of what a queen could be, what a woman could achieve, and how power could be shared and displayed. Even in modern times, the fascination with Nefertiti is not merely about her beauty, captured in the timeless bust that still inspires awe, but about the audacity, intelligence, cant, and cultural impact she wielded during a transformative era where spiritual upheaval, artistic innovation, and political experimentation converged, leaving an indelible mark on the sands of Egypt, the echoes of which resonate through history, inspiring countless stories, debates, and interpretations, and reminding us that in every age, certain individuals transcend their time, becoming symbols not just of power or beauty, but of the capacity to reshape the world around them through vision, courage, and determination. Nefertiti's influence extended far beyond the confines of palace walls and political chambers, seeping into every brushstroke, every chisel mark, and every carefully orchestrated ceremony. Her image, meticulously immortalized in the temples, tombs, and monuments that celebrated both her beauty and her authority, making her not merely a queen by association, but an unmistakable emblem of feminine and royal power in a culture that so often equated divinity with male rulers. For in her presence, whether rendered in the elongated, graceful forms characteristic of Akhenaten's artistic revolution, or captured in hymns and ritual texts that positioned her beside the pharaoh as a conduit of divine favor, Nefertiti conveyed a sense of agency, intellect, spiritual authority that was unprecedented, commanding attention, reverence, and, in some ways, envy from those who witnessed her ascendancy. The grand ceremonies that punctuated the religious and civic life of Akhenaten. She was no mere spectator. She moved deliberately, her gestures imbued with ritual significance, her gaze both commanding and reassuring, asserting her place at the heart of the kingdom's evolving ideology. A living icon whose presence broadcast a message of partnership and shared sovereignty. And whose likeness, repeated in wall reliefs, statues, and painted stele, communicated a cultural narrative in which feminine power was not hidden, subordinated, or symbolic alone, but visible, tangible, and undeniable, a testament to the capacity of one individual to redefine expectations and leave an indelible impression on both contemporaries and posterity. Artists captured Nefertiti not only in moments of solemn ceremonial grace, but in intimate depictions alongside her husband, revealing a woman whose authority was both public and personal, blending the divine and the human in ways that challenged conventional hierarchies and inspired generations to consider the fluidity of power, gender, and influence, a duality that made her image a constant subject of fascination for both her contemporaries and modern historians alike, and ensures that Nefertiti's legacy would endure not only as a symbol of aesthetic perfection, but as a beacon of intellectual, spiritual, and cultural influence, reminding the world that true power is not only wielded through force or title, but through presence, vision, and the ability to shape the collective imagination of a civilization. Yet just as Nefertiti's presence seemed destined to endure eternally in the annals of Egyptian history, a profound and haunting mystery unfolded that has perplexed scholars, ecologists, and enthusiasts for centuries. Around the 12th year of Akhenaten's 17-year reign, Nefertiti vanished from the historical record as suddenly and silently as she had once arrived, leaving behind no tomb, no inscription announcing her passing, no funerary mass to guide her soul through the afterlife, and no final words etched in stone or papyrus to whisper of her fate. As if the very civilization she had helped shape had, for reasons unknown, chosen to erase her from its official memory, leaving only the faint echo of her brilliance in fragments of art, scattered reliefs, and the lingering influence of her revolutionary presence in both courtly life and religious practice. This disappearance casts a shadow over the dazzling narrative of her life, transforming Nefertiti from a celebrated queen whose visage commanded admiration to a figure enshrouded in enigmatic absence, a woman whose abrupt erasure invites speculation, theory, and fascination in equal measure. For while the world continued under Akhenaten's experimental spiritual reign, the void left by her vanishing fueled questions that remain unanswered. Did she die suddenly and unceremoniously, stripped of the elaborate burial rites, so central to Egyptian belief in the afterlife? Or did she perhaps retreat into anonymity, living out her final years in quiet obscurity while the political tides shifted, power deliberately diminished by those who feared her influence, or even absorbed by her husband under a veil of political pragmatism and necessity? Archaeologists, historians, and Egyptologists have pieced together tantalizing clues, noting the sudden absence of her name from inscriptions, the fading of her likeness from temple reliefs, and the silence of court records where once she had been omnipresent. Heck, yet every potential explanation is fragmentary, conjectural, and incomplete, leaving her disappearance as one of the most enduring mysteries of ancient history, a puzzle that transforms Nefertiti from merely an emblem of beauty and authority into a symbol of the fragility of human memory, the precariousness of political and cultural legacy, and the haunting reality that even the most luminous figures who reshape societies and leave indelible marks on their civilizations can vanish from recorded history as if swept away by the desert wind itself, leaving future generations to wonder, to imagine, and to search for traces of a life that once shone so brightly, but now survives only in echoes, artistry, and the unanswerable questions that continue to stir curiosity and reverence across millennia. Despite the veil of mystery surrounding her disappearance, Nefertiti's legacy has proven remarkably resilient, transcending the sands of time and the silence of the historical record to assert a presence in both art and popular culture that continues to captivate and inspire the imagination of the modern world. Her visage immortalized most famously in the exquisite limestone bust discovered in the early 20th century, where her serene expression, elongated neck, and the distinctive blue crown combined to create an image of elegance, poise, and authority so powerful that it has become instantly recognizable across continents and generations. A symbol not only of ancient Egypt as artistic genius, but of the enduring allure of a woman whose influence defied the conventions of her era. Scholars, artists, and storytellers alike have debated the meaning and significance of her representation. Some sing Nefertiti as the embodiment of female power in a patriarchal world, a ruler whose intellect, spiritual authority, and partnership with Akhenaten allowed her to shape political and cultural transformations in ways that few women of any age could achieve, while others interpret her image through a lens of romanticized idealization, focusing on the enigmatic beauty and mystique that has allowed her story to be woven into novels, films, and visual art as an icon of timeless femininity, sensuality, and grace, often divorced from the political and spiritual agency she wielded in life, yet never entirely separated from the aura of influence and presence that made her a force to be reckoned with in her own right. Her imagery persists as a bridge between past and present, a touchstone for conversations about gender, authority, and historical memory, a reminder that power can manifest not only through conquest or decree, but through presence, intellect, and the ability to inspire awe, reflection, and imagination long after one has passed from the stage of life itself. And it is this duality, the simultaneous embodiment of political agency and artistic idealization, that ensures Nefertiti's story remains alive, a beacon of fascination and debate, a mirror through which each generation reinterprets what it means to wield influence, beauty, and authority, and a testament to the enduring human desire to understand, celebrate, and mythologize those who transcend their time, leaving behind a legacy that is as compelling, complex, and mysterious as the queen herself, even as Nefertiti's image continues to captivate the world. The historical context of her life and reign remains shrouded in complexity and tantalizing uncertainty, a puzzle that underscores the many gaps, ambiguities, and unresolved questions that persist within the field of Egyptology. For while her presence alongside Akhenaten is undeniable, the precise nature of her authority, whether she ruled as co-regent wielded independent power, or operated primarily as an advisor and ceremonial partner means open to interpretation. At each fragment of evidence, from wall reliefs to inscriptions, seems simultaneously illuminating and maddeningly incomplete, offering tantalizing glimpses into her life while leaving critical aspects obscured by time, political shifts, and the selective survival of material records. The enigma of her disappearance, for instance, is not merely a footnote in history, but a lens through which scholars must confront the fragility and partiality of the historical record itself, as the absence of a tomb, funerary text, or death notice challenges conventional understanding of royal protocol and the Egyptian obsession with the afterlife, provoking theories that range from hasty or secretive burial, political sidelining, or even relocation and assumed identity under a new title. Each hypothesis reflecting not only speculation about Nefertiti's fate, but also broader questions about how power, gender, and memory intersected in ancient Egypt, and how easily even the most influential figures could vanish from official narratives when circumstances demanded. Furthermore, the artistic innovations and religious reforms of Akhenaten's reign, in which Nefertiti played a visible and integral role, add another layer of complexity, as historians attempt to disentangle her personal influence from that of her husband's sweeping monotheistic experiment, considering whether she actively shaped policy, inspired stylistic shifts, or served primarily as a symbolic embodiment of divine femininity, while acknowledging that many contemporary records may have been deliberately erased, altered, or destroyed in subsequent reigns, seeking to restore traditional polytheistic structures, leaving modern researchers to rely on fragmented evidence, conjecture, cross-disciplinary analysis to piece together a portrait that can never be complete. In this way, Nefertiti's story highlights both the richness and the limits of Egyptology, reminding us that history is not a simple ledger of events and figures, but a living, interpretive discipline in which every discovery, absence, or anomaly invites deeper inquiry, speculation, and reflection, and that even a queen whose visage commands awe and whose legacy resonates through millennia can remain, paradoxically, both vividly present and maddeningly elusive. Her life and disappearance posing questions that continue to inspire curiosity, debate, and wonder, and emphasizing that understanding the past often means embracing uncertainty, acknowledging gaps, and finding meaning not only in what is known, but in what remains tantalizingly beyond reach. As the sun rises over mist-shrouded peaks, we shift our gaze from the grandeur of ancient Egypt to the remote, rugged mountains of southern China, where the Jwang and Yao ethnic groups, generations ago, confronted a challenge that was as formidable as any pharaoh's ambition: how to feed their communities on steep, unforgiving slopes where flat land was scarce and the tools of modern machinery were non-existent, and where each day required not only labor but imagination, patience, and an intimate understanding of the land itself, a knowledge honed over lifetimes and passed from elder to child, shaping both culture and survival. Faced with mountains that seemed impossible to cultivate, these resilient communities embarked on a monumental endeavor, carving terraces into the hillsides inch by a painstaking inch, not through brute force or haste, but through a dialogue with the terrain, where each level, each channel, and each carefully reinforced wall reflected an understanding of water, soil, and gravity, creating a symphony of engineering, ecology, and human tenacity that transformed what had once been inaccessible wilderness into a flowing, living landscape capable of sustaining entire villages. These terraces, often rising like staircases to the clouds, were more than functional. They were a testament to human ingenuity and a vivid illustration of the delicate balance between necessity and artistry. For every contour followed the natural topography, every channel directed water with precision, and every plot became a stage on which the seasons performed their cycles, where planting, growth, and harvest were dictated not by the arbitrary ticking of a clock, but by rainfall, moisture, and the intimate rhythm of the mountain itself. Generations of farmers learned to read the subtle cues of the environment, how the sun's angle would warm one slope while another remained shadowed, where water would naturally pool, and where erosion threatened to undo years of careful labor. And in doing so, they cultivated not just rice, but knowledge, patience, and an inherited wisdom that shaped community identity as profoundly as it shaped the land, teaching lessons about cooperation, observation, scent, and the patient artistry required to bend the natural world toward human sustenance without breaking it. Beyond their practical purpose, the terraces became a canvas upon which the seasons painted vibrant patterns. In spring, flooded plots reflected the sky like mirrored glass, clouds drifting beneath the farmer's feet and transforming the mountains into a heavenly panorama. In summer, the bright green shoots swayed like waves, a living sea of rice that rippled with the wind, each movement a testament to growth and resilience. In autumn, the gold of ripened grain shimmered in the sunlight, a reward for months of care and labor. And in winter, when frost and snow coated the terraces, the quiet geometry of stone and water stood as a reminder of endurance, continuity, in the unbroken cycle of life. Through this extraordinary collaboration between humans and their environment, the Jwang and Yao peoples created more than just agricultural infrastructure. They forged a living testament to adaptability, foresight, and harmony with nature. A landscape that endures not only because it produces food, but because it embodies a philosophy of coexistence, patience, and reverence for the land. And in standing upon these terraces, serving the intricate interplay of stone, water, and plant life, one cannot help but feel the weight of generations who sculpted impossibility into sustenance, transforming sheer mountainsides into fertile, flowing symbols of human perseverance and ingenuity that continue to sustain life and inspire wonder to this very day. The remarkable transformation of the mountainsides into productive terraces was achieved not with modern machinery or industrial technology, but through the meticulous application of simple tools, intimate knowledge, and generations of observational skill, where every stone lifted, every channel dug, and every embankment reinforced was the product of patience, precision, and a deep understanding of the rhythms of nature, a knowledge painstakingly honed over decades and passed down like sacred inheritance from elder to child, elder to apprentice, in a chain of wisdom that connected the past to the present. Armed with nothing more than stone hoes, wooden spades, and bamboo baskets that bore the weight of soil, water, and harvest alike, the farmers approached the mountains not as conquerors imposing their will, but as partners in a delicate negotiation with the land, observing carefully how water flowed along slopes, how rainfall collected or drained, and how the soil responded to sun, wind, and frost, using these lessons to sculpt terraces that were simultaneously functional, resilient, and in harmony with the environment. Every terrace represented countless hours of labor and a finely tuned awareness of the seasons. For planting and harvesting could not be rushed. Kami was dictated by the subtle changes in moisture, the angle of sunlight, and the rise and fall of water in channels designed to mimic and guide the natural patterns of the mountains. And children, growing up in these communities, absorbed this knowledge as naturally as they learned to walk. Watching elders measure, test, and adjust with quiet determination, developing intuition that could sense the land's needs and respond before disaster struck, whether in the form of erosion, flooding, or nutrient depletion. Bamboo baskets, lightweight yet remarkably strong, became extensions of human hands, carrying earth to precise locations, transporting water, and even functioning as temporary scaffolding or support, while hand tools allowed for detailed shaping of each terrace edge, creating gentle curves that absorbed rainfall, minimized soil loss, and guided water evenly to every rice plant, demonstrating an understanding of fluid dynamics and erosion control that modern engineers would admire. Beyond the practical mechanics, the techniques themselves were interwoven with cultural wisdom, ritual, and patient observation, forming a system in which human ingenuity and environmental sensitivity were were inseparable, where each terrace was not merely a place to grow food, but a living lesson in adaptability, foresight, and respect for natural forces. A philosophy cultivated over centuries that emphasized harmony rather than domination, attentiveness rather than haste, and cumulative knowledge rather than individual brilliance. In this way, the Jwang and Yao peoples did more than farm mountains. They choreographed a dance between human hands and the earth itself, transforming steep slopes into a sustainable network of terraces that fed communities, shaped identities, and exemplified a profound understanding of both the material and temporal dimensions of life, teaching that through observation, patience, and the careful application of skill handed down through generations, even the most daunting landscapes could be rendered fertile, productive, and profoundly beautiful. The genius of these terraces lies not only in the labor that carved them into the rugged slopes, but in the way they mirror the natural topography, flowing with the contours of the mountains rather than against them, creating an intricate harmony between human intention and geological form, so that the very landscape itself seems to breathe with human ingenuity, while retaining the organic rhythm of the earth. Each terrace bends and curves like a river, slowed into steps, following the mountain spine and shoulder, transforming what once appeared chaotic and unyielding into a graceful geometry that is both beautiful and functional. And in doing so, the farmers achieved more than subsistence. They achieved sustainability, fashioning a system that could endure for centuries without exhausting the land, replenished by careful stewardship and an ever-present awareness of the cycles of water, soil, and sky. Water, the lifeblood of rice cultivation, is guided through channels that cascade from terrace to terrace like liquid threads, sewing together the fabric of the mountain, each drop absorbed and shared rather than wasted, ensuring that even the steepest incline could sustain life without depleting the fragile resources of the ecosystem, while the structure of the terraces themselves prevents erosion, anchoring the soil against the pull of gravity and storms, so that the land not only survives human use, but thrives because of it. In this balance, the farmers created a landscape that was not an imposition, but an extension of nature's own design, an example of agriculture that sustained both people and environment, where productivity and preservation walked hand in hand, teaching lessons about coexistence that remain strikingly relevant in a modern age, often defined by over-extraction and imbalance. Standing at the base of such a mountainside, one sees not a battlefield between human ambition and natural force, but a collaboration, a dialogue where stone, water, and seed respond to the patient touch of countless hands, where sustenance is drawn not through conquest, but through reverence, patience, and skill. This living architecture of terraces is more than farmland. It is an enduring testament to the philosophy that true survival is found not in exhausting the earth, but in listening to it, mirroring its shapes, and shaping one's life in accordance with its rhythms, so that each harvest is not only a triumph of human labor, but a celebration of sustainable harmony, a partnership between mountain and community that continues to nourish both land and people across centuries. The terraces, alive with their mirrored curves and flowing channels, do not simply serve as static farmland, but as instruments in a grand symphony conducted by the changing seasons, each movement of the year bringing its own rhythm, color, and meaning, so that life in these mountains unfolds not by clocks or calendars, but by the pulse of growth, water, and earth. In spring, when the snows recede and the first rains soften the soil, the terraces are flooded with shimmering sheets of water that reflect the sky in luminous silver, turning the mountainside into a living mirror where clouds drift not only above, but below. And here the farmers step barefoot into the cool mud, planting rice seedlings with careful hands. Each small gesture, both an act of survival and a ritual of hope, as if laying prayers into the soil to be answered by the coming months. By summer, the terraces transform again, the once glass-like waters thickening with stalks of green that sway in endless waves, rippling across the mountainsides like an emerald ocean that rises higher with each passing week. And in the long, golden light of the season, the mountain appears less like stone and more like a living creature, clothed in verdant growth. Its pulse felt in every breeze, its breath carried in the scent of rice plants ripening beneath the sun. Autumn arrives with its own quiet majesty, turning the terraces into fields of gold. Every step, a treasure chest of ripened grain, ready to be gathered. And the act of harvest becomes not only the culmination of months of labor, but a celebration of patience rewarded as families work side by side, cutting and collecting the crop, singing old songs that echo across the slopes and remind them that survival here is not the achievement of one, but the shared triumph of many. Then, when winter descends and the winds sweep across the bare ridges, the terraces fall silent, their waters frozen or drained, their fields lying dormant beneath frost and snow, and the dragon of the mountain, as the locals often imagine it, curls into slumber, resting its coiled body until spring awakens it once more. Yet, even in this season of apparent stillness, the terraces do not die, they endure, waiting patiently, holding the memory of past harvests and the promise of future ones, reminding those who gaze upon them that life moves in cycles, that rest is as vital as growth, and that survival in the mountains is not a sprint, but a timeless dance with nature where each season offers its own lesson, its own beauty, and its own indispensable place in the eternal rhythm of the land. And so, when one steps back to truly take in the sight of these mountains carved into terraces that appear to climb endlessly toward the heavens, it becomes clear that what lies before the eye is not merely farmland, nor even just a practical response to hunger, but rather a living manuscript of human endurance and imagination, written across stone and soil by countless hands over countless generations. Each narrow ledge cut into the slope is an expression of patience, for no single season could shape such grandeur. It was the steady layering of years, the passing of knowledge from elder to child, and the quiet determination to coax life from the most unyielding of landscapes that created this marvel. And in that patience, one can read the story of a people who never surrendered to scarcity, but chose instead to carve abundance where none seemed possible. The terraces speak too of legacy, for every channel that carries water and every wall that holds back earth was not built for the builder alone, but for those yet to come, so that children might inherit not only land, but also the wisdom of how to tend it, how to live in balance with it, and how to see survival not as an individual achievement, but as a thread woven through the fabric of family and community. In this way, the terraces are both gift and responsibility, a testament to ancestors and a promise to descendants, ensuring that memory and survival are tied inseparably together in the very contours of the mountain. Most of all, they reveal a harmony with nature that is both profound and fragile. For instead of conquering the mountains, the farmers shaped themselves to them, mirroring the curves of the slopes, guiding water rather than forcing it, and learning through long observation when to plant, when to rest, when to trust the sky, and when to protect against its extremes. This balance, so carefully preserved, becomes a shield against scarcity. For in times when the earth yields less or the weather turns against them, the terraces, with their careful management of water and soil, provide resilience, a reminder that foresight and cooperation can soften the blows of fate. Thus, what rises from the mountainsides is not only rice, but a philosophy of life itself, one that teaches patience in the face of difficulty, reverence for those who came before, trust in the turning of seasons, and resilience in the endless negotiation with hunger and want. To look upon the terraces is to glimpse not just the ingenuity of farming, but the spirit of endurance, harmony, and hope, a story written in earth and water that continues to feed both body and soul long after the first seed was planted. Among the many enigmas that Egypt whispers to those who study its sands and stones, perhaps few ignites such fierce fascination as the theory of a sphinx that predates the dynasties we so carefully trace through pharaohs and temples. Sphinx, not merely older than the familiar guardian of Giza, but one that may have stood long before the first pyramids pierced the horizon. Its existence tied not to the deserts we see today, but to a world altered by water, a civilization older than memory, swallowed by floods or lost beneath shifting earth. This hypothesis, often discussed at the edges of orthodox Egyptology, dares to stretch the timeline of human history further back than scholars are comfortable placing it, suggesting that before the age of Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, or Ramses, there may have been an age still veiled in obscurity, when craftsmen and thinkers carved their mark upon the world in ways we barely begin to comprehend. The idea of a submerged or pre-dynastic sphinx unsettles conventional narratives, because it implies that the grandeur of Egypt was not simply the flowering of a single culture in the Nile Valley, but perhaps the continuation of traditions born in an even deeper antiquity. Traditions carried forward like echoes of a forgotten dawn. Imagine, for a moment, the colossal form of such a monument rising from rock as waves lapped against its feet, its gaze fixed on horizons long since changed, guarding mysteries that the Nile's annual floods would later bury beneath millennia of silt and stone. If true, this would mean that human ingenuity reached monumental scales far earlier than our textbooks admit, rewriting not only the history of Egypt, but of civilization itself, hinting at lost chapters where knowledge was won, preserved, and then obscured by time's relentless hand. In this way, the theory does not merely question the origins of one statue. It challenges the very framework by which we measure human progress, inviting us to consider the possibility that the rise of Egypt was not a sudden spark of genius, but a continuation of a much older fire, one that may still smolder beneath the waters, the sands, and the ruins, waiting for us to piece together its story. What lends weight to this extraordinary hypothesis is not merely imagination, but the subtle yet stubborn trail of evidence that continues to tease researchers and adventurers alike. For when one studies the body of the Sphinx and the stone that shapes its form, the marks of erosion speak in a language older than dynasties, whispering of rainfall and flowing water in a land where such storms have not touched the desert for thousands upon thousands of years. If the weathering upon its flanks is truly the fingerprint of ancient rains, rather than the scouring of mere sand, then the Sphinx may have stood watch in an age when the climate of North Africa was not barren, but lush, when rivers spilled their abundance across green plains now lost beneath the relentless advance of desert winds. Adding to the intrigue are modern technologies that peel back the layers of earth and time in ways the ancients themselves could never have imagined. Satellite images, scanning the terrain with unblinking eyes from above, revealed faint outlines and shapes buried beneath the sands, patterns that suggest structures yet inexcavated, as if fragments of a forgotten city sleep beneath the ground. LiDAR scans, firing beams of light that pierce through surface clutter, return ghostly impressions of formations where none should exist, suggesting that what we see on the surface may be only a fraction of what was once raised in honor of gods, kings, or forces beyond our full comprehension. Even the Nile, that eternal artery of Egyptian life, has been known to briefly expose hints of secrets when its waters recede in seasons of unusual drought or shift. In such moments, stones shaped by human hands seem to glimmer into view before vanishing once again beneath the river's veil, as though the land itself chooses when to share its memories and when to keep them hidden. These glimpses erosion patterns carved by vanished storms, images captured from the sky, scans that strip away the concealment of millennia, and fleeting exposures from the Nile's own ebb and flow, do not yet tell a complete story, but they gather into a chorus of suggestion, a murmur that what lies beneath the sands and waters may force us to rethink not only when Egypt began, but how deep the roots of human civilization may truly run. If the whispers of an ancient or submerged sphinx were ever to be confirmed, the implications would ripple far beyond the sands of Giza. For such a revelation would demand not just a minor adjustment to timelines, but a complete rethinking of how and when human civilization achieved its first great leaps of ingenuity. The very foundations of Egyptology rest on the assumption that the grand temples, pyramids, and statues arose within a defined arc of history, tied to dynastic rulers whose names and deeds had been preserved on stone and papyrus. Yet, the discovery of a monument predating those rulers would force us to confront the possibility that Egypt's architectural genius was not the sudden flowering of a single culture, but rather the inheritance of knowledge far older, passed down like an echo from a civilization whose memory has otherwise been erased. Imagine the shift in perspective this would bring. The colossal pyramids, which we now marvel at as the pinnacle of Old Kingdom engineering, might instead represent a continuation, a refinement of methods already practiced by builders whose names we no longer know. Builders who carved the first great guardian into living rock, while the climate and landscape of North Africa were unrecognizable to us today. Such a realization would draw into question how we measure progress, for it would imply that human societies rose to remarkable heights of organization, artistry, and technological skill long before the neatly ordered pharaonic dynasties we record in textbooks. It would also force us to reconsider the very idea of cultural beginnings. For the notion of a linear ascent from primitive huts to monumental stone would no longer suffice. Instead, we might have to accept that civilizations rise, fall, and rise again, carrying fragments of forgotten brilliance into new ages, their achievements not simply steps forward on a single ladder, but the ebb and flow of tides, sometimes revealing, sometimes concealing what humankind is capable of. And in this light, the story of Egypt would not be a tale of sudden emergence, but of continuity, resilience, and reinvention, stretching back to horizons more distant than we ever dared to imagine. If such implications prove true, then the Sphinx ceases to be just a monument of kingship or a symbol of the sun's eternal gaze and becomes instead a bridge to a deeper past, sentinel not merely of dynasties, but of humanity itself, silently reminding us that the roots of our story may lie buried far deeper than we are prepared to admit, awaiting the courage and curiosity of those willing to uncover them. Yet, as tantalizing as the notion of an ancient, submerged sphinx is, the path to uncovering such truths is not only littered with sand and stone, but also with the intricate web of human politics, academic caution, and economic interests from mainstream scholars trained to value evidence that fits neatly within established timelines. Approach these claims with deliberate skepticism, aware that extraordinary assertions demand extraordinary proof, and wary of the repercussions that could ripple through centuries of carefully curated historical narratives. If a pre-dynastic monument were verified, the caution is understandable in one sense, for Egyptology as a discipline relies on methodical excavation, documentation, and peer-reviewed research. Yet in another sense, this conservatism can appear as a barrier to discovery, a subtle inertia that favors certainty over curiosity and orthodoxy over daring inquiry, leaving alternative hypotheses suspended in a liminal space between intrigue and dismissal. Layered atop this scholarly caution are the very real considerations of tourism and political economy. For Egypt's ancient sites are not merely cultural treasures, but pillars of national identity and revenue, drawing millions of visitors whose presence sustains communities and bolsters the economy. A revelation that challenges the established chronology, suggesting that monuments are far older or that their origins lie outside the neat dynastic framework, could unsettle this carefully managed narrative, raising questions about authenticity, heritage, and the stories that governments and institutions rely upon to promote stability and pride. In some cases, the suppression of such findings may be less about deliberate concealment and more about the fear of unintended consequences. The new sphinx or evidence of one were confirmed. How would textbooks, tour guides, museum exhibits, and even international understanding of Egyptian history adapt? Despite these obstacles, the controversy itself fuels fascination, igniting the imaginations of researchers, explorers, and enthusiasts who wandered the desert with cameras, LiDAR scanners, and satellite images in hand, attempting to catch glimpses of a past that has been intentionally or unintentionally obscured by the passage of time in the interests of the present. In this tension between evidence and acceptance, between curiosity and caution, the underwater sphinx occupies a space that is as enigmatic as the Nile itself, a reminder that history is not a static ledger of facts, but a living dialogue between what is known, what is hypothesized, and what we dare to dream might still lie hidden, waiting for the right moment or the right observer to bring it to light. When we step back from the sands, the terraces, the tombs, and the submerged stones, a broader truth emerges, one that humbles and inspires in equal measure. History is fragile, not fixed, and constantly subject to the forces of time, chance, and human interpretation, so that what we think we know about the past is never absolute, but a delicate weave of surviving artifacts, written records, oral traditions, and the imagination of those who attempt to piece it together. Every discovery, whether it is a hidden chamber beneath a pyramid, a weathered inscription on a cliff, or the fleeting hint of a structure revealed by receding waters, has the power to challenge narratives long held as unshakable, forcing scholars, enthusiasts, and the casual observer alike to reconsider what we have accepted as fact, to question the assumptions upon which entire chronologies are built, and to entertain the tantalizing possibility that civilization may be far older, far more complex, and far more mysterious than we have been taught to believe. It is in these liminal spaces where certainty falters and speculation rises that human imagination thrives, for the allure of the unknown speaks to something deep within us, a primal desire to uncover, to connect, to bridge the gap between what has been lost and what can still be understood. We are drawn to enigmas like the underwater sphinx, the terraces clinging to mountainsides, or the silent corridors of palaces and temples, not merely for the thrill of mystery, but because they offer a mirror to our own persistence, creativity, and curiosity, reminding us that the past is never truly gone, that the stories of our ancestors can still whisper across centuries, and that every stone, every channel, and every faded painting may carry lessons, warnings, or inspiration waiting to be recognized. In this way, history becomes more than a record of events, becomes a living dialogue between those who lived it, those who study it, and those who dare to imagine beyond the surface, And it is precisely the fragility of these narratives, the gaps in our understanding, and the mysteries that persist despite millennia of scholarship that captured the human spirit, urging us onward in the eternal quest to see farther, to question more deeply, and to marvel at the ingenuity, endurance, and wonder that have shaped our world from the mountains to the Nile, from the hidden valleys to the sands that conceal secrets still waiting to be revealed. When we widen our lens beyond specific monuments, taverns, or terraces, an undeniable pattern begins to emerge, one that paints human history not as a straight line of progress neatly recorded in textbooks, but as a vast, chaotic tapestry woven from the messiness, vibrancy, and unpredictability of countless lives, ambitions, mistakes, and triumphs that too often remain underexplored or entirely forgotten, leaving us with tantalizing glimpses of worlds that once were and the faint echoes of people who shaped them in ways both profound and ephemeral. From the muddy streets and smoky rooms of medieval taverns where knights, bards, farmers, and children collided in a cacophony of laughter, argument, and music, to the precise, patient, and intergenerational labor of ethnic communities carving terraces into mountainsides to coax life from seemingly impossible slopes, to the grand and enigmatic visions of rulers like Nefertiti and the mysterious Sphinx of Egypt that challenge our most foundational assumptions about civilization. History reveals itself as a living, breathing organism, messy in its realities, dazzling in its ingenuity, and endlessly full of surprises for those willing to look beyond the surface. The vibrancy of human life, its humor, its cruelty, its artistry, and its resilience courses through every era, reminding us that the past was never sterile or static, but lived, experienced, and deeply felt, and that each overlooked corner, each minor artifact, each fragment of oral tradition has the potential to reshape our understanding, to illuminate hidden connections, and to reveal the complex interplay between culture, environment, and imagination that has driven humanity from age to age. History, in its truest form, refuses simplicity, resisting the tidy narratives we sometimes impose upon it, insisting instead that we embrace its contradictions, its raw textures, its unexpected turns, the vibrant mosaic of human experience that continues to inform who we are today, how we perceive ourselves, and how we might navigate the unknown challenges of tomorrow. In recognizing this, we come to understand that every record, every ruin, every whispered legend is not merely a relic of what was, but a testament to the depth, the audacity, and the resilience of people who, despite scarcity, danger, or uncertainty, carved meaning, beauty, and community out of the chaos around them, leaving behind traces that beckon us to explore further, question more deeply, and, ultimately, to appreciate that history's true richness lies not in polished summaries or neatly ordered timelines, but in the untamed, vivid, and often underexplored realities of human existence itself, waiting to be discovered, understood, and celebrated. As we continue to wander through the corridors of time, peering into the lives of those who came before us, we begin to see that everyday existence, far from being mundane or uniform, serves as a profound window into the resilience, ingenuity, and cultural depth of human societies, revealing that survival was never a mere biological imperative, but a complex interplay of environment, creativity, social bonds, and ritual that shaped the way people lived, thought, and connected across vastly different eras and geographies. In the bustling, smoke-filled medieval taverns of Europe, for instance, the simple act of gathering for a drink or sharing a meal was imbued with layers of social negotiation, community identity, and informal governance, where knights and farmers, bards and merchants collided in a chaotic symphony of human interaction, negotiating alliances, testing boundaries, and forging relationships that were as vital to their survival as the ale they drank or the bread they shared. All within a space where danger, humor, and camaraderie coexisted in an intoxicating mix of unpredictability and tradition. Shift then to the sun-baked temples and palaces of ancient Egypt, where the life of a queen like Nefertiti and the grand ceremonial displays surrounding pharaohs were not merely spectacles of power, but intricate systems that fused spirituality, political influence, and cultural identity, demonstrating that human ingenuity often manifests as much in the subtle manipulation of perception and symbolism as in tangible, technological, or architectural feats, in that the daily realities of governance, religious rites, artistic creation were deeply intertwined with notions of legacy, divinity, and societal cohesion, offering lessons in leadership, creativity, and the enduring power of image and narrative. Farther east, in the remote mountains of China, the Jwang and Yao communities carved terraces into seemingly impossible slopes, a feat that transformed inhospitable terrain into a living mosaic of rice paddies, irrigation channels, and sustainable ecosystems, requiring patience measured not in days or months, but in generations, with knowledge passed carefully from elders to children, and with an acute attunement to the rhythms of nature, from the first hint of spring flooding to the golden shimmer of autumn harvest and the quiet dormancy of winter, illustrating that survival is often inseparable from observation, adaptation, and the cultivation of harmony with one's environment. Across these disparate regions and epochs, we begin to recognize a common thread, that the details of everyday life, how people ate, quote, celebrated, protected themselves, and nurtured community, carry invaluable insights into the extraordinary ingenuity of the human spirit. The resilience required to navigate scarcity, uncertainty, and danger, and the cultural expressions that make each society unique yet universally human. By studying these lived experiences, we see that history is not merely a collection of dates, rulers, or monuments, but a vibrant, dynamic tapestry of human effort, imagination, and adaptation, each era offering lessons that resonate far beyond its own time, shaping the ways we understand survival, creativity, and culture, even in our own modern world. As we trace the winding paths of human history, it becomes increasingly clear that what draws us most irresistibly to the past is not merely the accumulation of facts, dates, or architectural achievements, but the fertile ground of mystery, imagination, and storytelling that breathes life into these distant worlds, allowing us to step into the shoes of those who came before us and experience the thrill, the fear, and the ingenuity of their daily lives, as though they were our own. It is through stories, both those carefully preserved on stone, parchment, and clay, and those whispered, embellished, and passed down through generations, that the past becomes more than a static archive, transforming instead into a living narrative in which knights in smoky taverns brawl and jest, queens like Nefertiti wield power and intrigue beside revolutionary pharaohs, and mountain farmers coax rice from impossible slopes with patience measured in generations, each tale inviting us to imagine not just what happened, but what it felt like to be alive in that time, to confront scarcity, danger, ambition, and wonder with human ingenuity and resilience as our only companions. Mystery fuels this connection by leaving gaps that beckon our curiosity, by offering hints of vanished structures, lost rituals, or enigmatic faces carved into stone that provoke questions rather than providing tidy answers, compelling us to explore, speculate, and dream about possibilities that may never be fully confirmed, yet enrich our understanding of human experience in profound ways. Imagination allows us to walk through those shadowed taverns, to feel the humid air of terraced mountains at dawn, to hear the ceremonial chants echoing through Egyptian temples, and to taste, hear, and sense the textures of lives lived long before our own, making history tactile, emotional, and deeply personal despite the centuries that separate us. Storytelling, finally, is the bridge between mystery and imagination, the mechanism through which these distant lives reach across time to touch our consciousness, reminding us that the past is not merely to be studied, but to be inhabited in the mind and heart, where we can marvel at human creativity, empathize with struggle, and celebrate resilience, ingenuity, and the enduring power of culture. In weaving together mystery, imagination, and storytelling, we find that connecting with history is not just an intellectual pursuit, but a profoundly human one, allowing us to see ourselves reflected in the triumphs, failures, and ordinary moments of those who lived before us, and to carry forward the timeless lessons they offer into the way we understand our world, our communities, and our place within the ongoing story of humanity. As we draw our journey through time to a close, it becomes clear that medieval taverns were far more than mere establishments for eating and drinking. They were the pulsating heart of their communities, chaotic and smoky, yet full of life, laughter, and stories that bound knights, farmers, bards, the curious traveler, together in ways both unpredictable and unforgettable. Within their haphazardly arranged interiors, where benches, barrels, and crates formed a labyrinthine network of communal space, one could witness the full spectrum of humanity: rough men with grizzled faces, sharp-witted women capable of silencing a room with a single glance, children darting through legs in pursuit of bread or coins, and animals comfortably ensconced, as if they had long paid their dues. The smells of strong, often homemade ale, tangy cider, dense bread, and pungent cheese mingled with the smoke and chaos to create an atmosphere that was simultaneously overwhelming and intimate, intoxicating in both literal and figurative senses. Here, entertainment was not merely a pastime, it was woven into the very fabric of daily life, with bards plucking squeaky strings while spinning ballads, its patrons flirting with exaggerated charm or comedic audacity, and occasional bar fights erupting in a dance of chaos and humor, reminding everyone present that life in the tavern was lived fully, with laughter and folly as constant companions. Sleeping arrangements were equally pragmatic and communal, with benches, corners, and even spaces beneath the tables providing refuge for those who could not secure a room. Reinforcing the sense that taverns offered more than sustenance, they provided a place to belong, a stage upon which stories were enacted, in a community that, despite its disorder, offered connection and shared humanity. Turning our gaze from the raucous warmth of medieval Europe to the monumental elegance of ancient Egypt, the life and legacy of Queen Nefertiti stand as a testament to the extraordinary ways individuals could shape cultural and spiritual landscapes. Rising alongside Pharaoh Akhenaten, Nefertiti's visibility in art, ceremony, and public life transformed her from a royal consort into an icon of both feminine and sovereign power. Her likeness immortalized in busts, reliefs, and inscriptions that radiate poise, intellect, and influence across millennia. Yet her story is also shrouded in mystery. Around the 12th year of Akhenat's reign, she vanished from the historical record entirely, leaving no tomb, no death notice, and no definitive clue to her ultimate fate. This absence has only magnified her mystique, ensuring that her imagery, debated as a symbol of female power or romanticized elegance, continues to captivate artists, historians, and the general public alike, while simultaneously highlighting the gaps in our understanding of Egyptology and the precarious nature of historical preservation, where even the most powerful figures can be lost to time, leaving us to reconstruct their lives through fragments, speculation, and imagination. In a vastly different part of the world, the mountainsides of southern China bear witness to a form of human ingenuity and patience that rivals the grandest monuments of Egypt. The Jwang and Yao ethnic groups, facing steep slopes and limited flat land, meticulously carved terraces for rice cultivation, shaping the mountains with hand tools, bamboo baskets, decades of generational knowledge, while carefully observing the flow of water and the changing seasons. These terraces were more than practical agricultural structures. They mirrored the natural contours of the land, harmonizing human activity with the environment in ways that were sustainable, elegant, and profoundly respectful of the forces of nature. Through spring planting, summer growth, autumn harvest, and winter dormancy, the terraces became living reflections of resilience, patience, and legacy, teaching lessons about how communities can thrive even in the face of scarcity, environmental challenges, and the slow passage of time. Returning once more to the enigmas of ancient Egypt, the hypothesis of a submerged or pre-dynastic sphinx near the Nile further reminds us that history is fragile, and our understanding of it remains in constant flux. Evidence from erosion patterns, satellite imagery, LiDAR scans, and partial exposures during low Nile flows suggests that monumental architecture may predate previously accepted timelines, potentially forcing a reconsideration of the origins of Egyptian civilization itself. Yet, this evidence exists in a delicate balance, contested and debated, with mainstream scholars proceeding cautiously and political and economic considerations influencing how much attention such discoveries receive. The very possibility of a submerged sphinx, whether proven or not, captivates the imagination and underscores a profound truth. History is never fixed, and the mysteries of the past continue to challenge, intrigue, and inspire us, reminding us that the past is as much about the stories we tell and the questions we ask as it is about the facts we can verify. Taken together, these glimpses of human history, from the chaotic warmth of medieval taverns to the grandeur and enigma of ancient Egyptian courts, from the patient artistry of mountain terraces to the submerged mysteries of forgotten monuments, reveal a tapestry of human life that is messy, vibrant, and often underexplored. Everyday existence, whether in the clamor of a tavern, the solemnity of a royal ceremony, or the meticulous rhythms of agricultural life, teaches us about survival, ingenuity, and culture, while mystery, imagination, and storytelling allow us to bridge the centuries and connect with lives long past, breathing vitality into names, places, and practices that might otherwise be reduced to dust and footnotes. It is in this interplay of fact and wonder, of effort and imagination, that history truly comes alive, offering both lessons and inspiration for those willing to see beyond the surface and embrace the rich, intricate, and sometimes chaotic beauty of the human journey. So, as you settle down for the night, let your mind wander through smoky taverns, sun-drenched temples, and terraced mountains, letting the stories of those who came before you whisper across the centuries, and remember that history, with all its messiness, mystery, and marvels, is not merely something to study, it's something to experience in the imagination, to carry with you, and to allow to inspire your own place in the ever-unfolding human story. Good night, and may your dreams be filled with the adventures, discoveries, and wonders of the past.